Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. And this one is called Construction Matters. It doesn't happen as often as some of the others, but one of the reasons is because Michelle Carr, who's our tame QS, is in great supply or demand, I should say, not supply, and is not always available. But here she is, thank goodness. Today's topic, which is, as usual, hopefully ruffling somebody's feathers, the weak link in UK house building. And as is traditional, Hamish, would you start us off?
Well, I don't know where this idea of the tame came from relative to Michelle. However, we perhaps ought to explain. It's very, very easy to pick up what the media's saying because they have this overemphasis. And I'm very, very fortunate that I learned an awful lot myself from the podcast that Gareth and I put out between us. And it's particularly handy when somebody like Michelle comes on board with her knowledge, because with her, as we were actually saying earlier, she's very much closer to the ground than either Gareth or myself. I consider myself fortunate in terms of what I do know about some aspects to do with property and what I'm concerned with. Gareth knows next to nothing, as he demonstrates on a regular basis.
Probably less than that.
But what we've got a situation here.
Quite a lot about contracts, apparently, but there you go.
But what happens, we do have, like life does change. The only thing we guarantee in life is the fact that it changes. And very often a change which we actually sort of see, we look at an obvious cause of that change. The change is happening anyway. Sometimes they're not even necessarily a cause. But we look at a situation, we have a distinct shortage of materials, and it's very, very easy to look, as I did, and sort of say, hey, whoa, concrete, look at that. And when you actually look at it on straight on the face of it, it's the lowest volume, or the lowest weight, if you like, of concrete manufactured in the UK since 1959. The previous sort of 12 months. Now, if that's the case, you need to get this concrete up above the ground before you can start building. So is that not one of the things which is going to have a dramatic impact on really the house build? If we've got a build program going on, one of the big arguments, and this again is an important argument, and it doesn't just affect concrete, which maybe my interpretation isn't entirely right. Michelle will put us right on that matter. However, we do have a challenge. The manufacturing costs in the UK are much higher because the cost of our energy, which has artificially been increased by successive governments because of the way they're trying to replace it. But because of the manufacturing, and this is one of the arguments that would come through, materials now, instead of Brexit happening the way it should have done to make us more self-sufficient, because of the energy costs in the UK, we're allegedly outside of Europe now, so we're paying more for stuff from Europe, but it's still cheaper to buy stuff from Europe because their manufacturing costs are lower because of the energy input. Anyway, that's enough. Let's hear from Michelle about some of these shortages and why she thinks we have a shortage, or should we, in fact, stop producing as much concrete?
Right. Well, Michelle, can we cement some new ideas, please?
Well, there's quite a lot to unpack there, Hamish, and I'm not going to go into all of it because we'll end up going to completely off track. So I've got a number of ideas about concrete. I'm not a concrete specialist for a start, so don't blame me on this. But I mean, back in, I would think, the probably early 2000s, there was a lot being done by Blue Circle digging around the Essex area. Now, I bought a property a few days after my daughter was born in 2006 in a place called Grays in Essex, and there was a whole, basically Trafford 100, the most of Grays was at one point a quarry, and they were digging, so I believe it was Blue Circle, and it was concrete or similar materials that made concrete. Now, I don't know whether that many of those places exist to have been able to quarry that in the first place. That could be one aspect. I don't know. I'm not a concrete specialist, but I do think that the reason that there's concrete as an example is we're using less of it. Now, the reason we're using less of it, in my opinion, is one, because the issue with concrete is it's messy, but also it takes a lot of time. You need a lot of steel. It takes a lot of preparation. I mean, if you're doing shuttering or whatever you're doing with concrete, it needs to, if you're forming a concrete structure, for example, you need to do all your work to make sure that it stays where it is. You pour it wet, and then you have to leave it to go hard and take another bits and pieces. And it's an extensive process, and it makes the whole construction process much lengthier and more time consuming, and things can go wrong and whatever and so forth and so on. However, I do personally think it's one of the best materials to be using in foundations. So I just don't think we're using as much concrete in buildings. So for example, my house is 6 years old. It's got a concrete foundation. It's a timber house with brick slips and cladding. So we not even using full bricks. It's just a part of the brick. Now, some bricks can be cut into 2 bits, and it just creates a panel, or you can have a cladding system, which is where it's basically a steel frame, and then you just slide the bricks in. You can move around, you mortar them, and it looks like it's brick, but it's not. It takes a matter of days to be installed rather than months. Because obviously when you're building bricks, when you're using things where things have to set, you have to wait for them to set. And in this country, with the weather conditions that we have, those times can be exceeded much longer, because of all of a sudden we've got a downpour in the middle of August, and we've got torrential rain, or it's 5 degrees and it's the middle of August. So these things make an issue for construction, which increases costs.
I've got some stats for you, which I've just dug out, which I think you might find interesting. Concrete consumption has hit a 62-year low. In Q2 2025, ready-mix concrete sales fell to just 2.7 million cubic meters, which is the lowest quarterly figure since 1963. And it doesn't look like any sign of abating it. Now, on further analysis, precast components appear to be the reason why it's dropped more than anything else.
Yeah, so precast concrete, the problem with it's been quite popular, and I've used it in numerous situations. And basically what happens is you create a steel frame, and then you get kind of like a planks that are then fitted in. Now, the issue with that is if they're not measured correctly, or someone has allowed for tolerances, and all of a sudden your frame doesn't fit, and you've done all these other works, it becomes expensive. So some people are trying to avoid from using that method, which is a shame, because if you have the right contractor, the right supplier, those things shouldn't, and the right contracts in the first place, those things shouldn't happen, but they do. But also you need to understand that we now have modular as a preferred construction. A lot of people are using steel frames. I mean, look at some of the buildings that have gone up in London in the last 10 years. Majority of them are glass.
Glass and steel.
Yeah, and also there's many different ways and methods that people want to use. Now, I don't know enough about manufacturing to know the comparison between steel manufacture and concrete, but I also know that you can recycle concrete, which a lot of people are doing, is recycle concrete to create MOT and bases for foundations and concrete slabs and things like that. But I don't know how it works with steel and comparison of energy. I mean, obviously steel does use a lot of heat, but I don't know enough about the methodologies to do a comparison. But I just know the designs that I'm looking at, and that I have been for the last at least 2 or 3 years, have been a lot less concrete and a lot more steel or timber.
Well, the interesting thing, I've been doing a bit more digging. Ready-mix concrete cells is the bigger part of it, the ready-mix stuff. And the decline is completely tied to sluggish housing construction and infrastructure delays. So I don't know where you're getting that from, but a lot of houses don't use a lot of concrete. Now, they used to use concrete frame. In fact, there's houses that I've worked on, especially for the MOD, and they were concrete boxes put on top of each other. And they're sort of more temporary. Now, as I said, most of the houses that are being built now, they're trying to build them much faster. It's highly unlikely if they don't have a concrete base. So they might have a concrete suspended floor, they might not. But most of the time, the ready-mix pumped concrete is for foundations only. But they haven't been using concrete a lot in housing anyway. It's normally steel or timber or brick. I mean, back in the old days, it'd be brick and block. So concrete was only ever used in housing, unless you're talking about flats where there used to be concrete structures. Yeah, 100%. That was very, very common. And I think people are moving away from that now and doing steel frames, because they can do more things with it. It's much easier to hide services that are accessible through steel frames. So you're attesting that steel frame is really because of the movement towards steel frame and paneling
Yeah,
and
but also don't
cladding.
forget, it's about design. So the way that, especially in housing, so if you're talking about a block of flats, whether it be for student accommodation, for anyone, makes no difference. You need to have the amount of cabling that is required now, because you've got data cables, and you don't just need one data cable. Most houses or flats now, especially for the younger generation, or exceptionally for students, need 2 or 3 data cables per property. If you've got 90 or 100 or 3, imagine how many cables there are. You need service risers. So then you need everything to go, all these cables need to go from one point to every single location, every bedroom within the building. Not only do you have that, you're going to have a number of cables. So you need cables for all your electricity supplies. Okay, so a lot of companies have gone away from gas now, but ultimately, if you've got concrete and you pour concrete and you've got cables in the mix, if something, is there an issue with that? You cannot access it. So generally what you need is you need voids. And the easiest way to do voids is to have a steel frame rather than using concrete, because it's a lot faster. Also, I mean, in my opinion, sometimes the contracts and the projects are started far too soon, and they haven't got all their ducks in a row, and they don't necessarily know what they need. And the only way of adjusting things and allowing is to have these big voids. And the best way to have that, you can have a concrete frame still and still have a void underneath it, but it's much easier and quicker. And obviously labor is expensive to use a concrete frame or modular system or something like that. But yeah, the way that our expectations and our demands on housing have changed, we want it to be eco-friendly. We have to have somebody analyze it, whether it be BREEAM or not. We have to understand the carbon effect on the building. There's so many things that have changed in the last 5 or 10 years that the requirements have changed. So I'm surprised that people don't understand that things go out of date. Like, I remember cars. Remember when petrol was the amazing thing, and then we had unleaded petrol. Then we had diesel was the most amazing thing. Now diesels are death, and we've gone back to petrol or electric. It's not going to be long before electric is it's already started with people saying how dangerous electric cars and how much they damage the environment and stuff. So there's always going to be a change, but that's life, right?
Apparently, Hamish, that's life. I feel like breaking into a theme tune. Go on.
We've got one, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, this is quite fascinating, because change is one of those things that we can absolutely guarantee it is actually going to happen. And sometimes we don't necessarily look at it as being the best. I was very fortunate in one of my earlier lifetimes to sort of work in engineering. And one of my areas of expertise, allegedly, was in the purchase of steel. I used to buy sort of goodness knows how many thousands of tons of steel, but when you're actually buying in to produce fuel tanks and exhaust systems and all the rest of it, that was using one heck of a lot of steel. And at that particular stage, it was great. You could go down, you go into the steel manufacturers. Now look where we are with our steel manufacture. We don't actually even own. We own such a small amount of steel manufacturing. We've sold off to it's the Chinese, isn't it? They actually own our steel manufacturing. Now here we are. We've now reached a situation where steel has become useful again. We're not manufacturing any cars in the UK, anything like we used to previously. So we don't need steel. So we can turn around and say, well, that's steel. Do we wipe out steel as a manufacturing process in this country? Well, we nearly have. And it's only by the interception of certain knowledgeable people within the industry that have actually sort of kept the steel manufacturing afloat. Otherwise, it would have gone completely in this country. But now the demands are greater. So, of course, if we're not where's it coming from? Well, China will be one of them. And, of course, the last thing we want at the moment, because of the state of our economy, is to increase more and more our imports. But we no longer, I mean, our locality here where we are in North Oxfordshire, we used to have some amazing brickworks. In fact, 2 members of my wife's family did actually work at the local sort of brick company, sort of over sort of time period. I mean, that closed down some years ago now. So we're not manufacturing as many bricks in the UK, but as Michelle points out, we're not quite using them in the same way. We are using cladding more. And are we using that cladding as effectively we should be? There's a lot of things that change. And
going by what Michelle said earlier, the way in which modern housing infrastructure, that's from cabling and pipes and so on and so forth, goes, the need for voids behind the skin of the outside and the inside of the house is ever increasing, which makes far more sense for it to be a steel frame structure, and then you've got ease of access to get pipes and cables and the rest of it.
And also I think it's speed, because materials have been going up and up and up, which everyone's aware of. It's been happening for the whole of my career. There's a shortage of this has gone up, this has gone crazy. It's the way of the construction works, and it's the things you have to juggle. I mean, I remember a point a few years ago when all of a sudden roofing materials went from being available for 3 to 4 weeks, and over a 4-day period went to 16 weeks, and the prices doubled. And that's construction. It's the nature of the beast. I mean, I don't know where the decision has come from, because all of the concrete that we use anyway has to be reinforced with steel. So have they just cut out their middle product as such and just gone straight for steel? I don't know. I mean, my house doesn't have that much steel in it. It has a whacking great steel right through the middle of it. But other than that, it's a timber frame building. Now, again, I don't know. But there's also been a point where aluminium windows were cheaper than timber windows because of the way prices go. So things change all the time. And I think that's where, I mean, I had a number of conversations yesterday with people about AI and whose careers are affected by AI. Now, I could be oblivious, but I think there's certain professions like my own where AI is not. It's difficult for human beings to keep up with all the moving parts, let alone AI, when it comes to construction, because no two jobs are the same. I mean, I've mentioned the estate where I live is 52 houses, and they're not all the same. I mean, they're the same design and mirrors of each other, and there's the odd one that's slightly different for layout, but the way that they were built is not exactly the same. And some have had issues with this, and some have not had issues with that, and that's on the same road. So that's just the way that construction is. I don't know the full extent, and also the media will get excited about something to create fear or divide or whatever it may be. I don't really pay that much attention to it personally, as you both know. But yeah, I think there's a lot more but the biggest pressure is speed and time, and concrete is not fast and it's messy. So I do think that there's a lot to get these houses up quick. I mean, I drove through an area recently that I hadn't been to for probably 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden there's an entire block of houses or flats or whatever it may be, flats probably, that just weren't there 3 months ago. I mean, when back in the sort of the 80s, 90s, even in the early 2000s, you couldn't build a block of flats that quick. It was impossible. But then I don't know whether that's because of the housing shortage. I don't know whether that's because my personal thing is that being on site longer is much more expensive. I'm always saying to clients and anyone that will listen, spend longer at the front. Don't start setting up your site until the last minute that you have to, because as soon as you set it up, if things aren't right, you're going to cost yourself a lot of money. And as soon as you open that site up and you've got toilets on it and all the health and safety issues and you've got people on it, that's when you're starting to really get clock up some costs. Can
I throw a curveball in there?
Go for it.
I've been looking at huge 3D printers for 3D printing concrete and other similar materials. They can create the voids as they go. They print thinner because the way the mixture is in place, that it's viscous enough that it creates lines. They can knock up at least the basis of a house pretty much over a 48-hour period.
Yeah, I think that, again, that could be the way forward. I don't know. I'm not involved in sort of design aspects that much anymore. My role has changed considerably within the industry, so I'm not 100%, but that's possible. I mean, the only thing that would concern me about that is the amount of testing that's required in order to have that safe. Now, you guys know more than most about what testing goes on now and what the regulations are, what BBAs you need, and the scientific independent testing that's required, and something like that I think is possibly coming, but whether or not it can withhold or get the confidence for people to put a rubber stamp on it, because I'm struggling to get FRAs to sign off small properties now for minuscule things. It's painful to get anyone to sign anything at the moment. Signing on the dotted line seems to be difficult, and people to actually put their money where their mouth is. So whether or not that comes to fruition, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's where manufacturing is going. I mean, to be fair, I remember going around the Cadbury's factory when I was little, and it all being people. You take my sons around it, and there's hardly any people. It's all machines.
Hardly anybody at all. And this is the direction of travel for many industries with repetitive elements in it. Hamish, Would you care to take us home, sir?
Well, I think we need to bring in one other interesting aspect of what we're speaking of. And again, it's because of the methods that we are using. One would hope they improve. We do want this speed. We do want things to be able to be pushed up sort of quicker. We've got a situation now, we're using much more timber. Now, it's not just people that are coming to this country illegally. There are a large number of timber imports which are coming to this country illegally. And therefore, we don't have the element of control over those that we used to have. Right. So there's a shortage of timber. So we're trying to draft it in. So where's the element of control in that? So it's just another thing to add to that particular sort of mix. And if Michelle sort of says, as she's sort of quite right, once we get on those sites, we want to do things quickly. We've got to look at cost. It's a vital part now. And we're driven very, very much by cost, but we're also driven an awful lot by safety, new developments, interesting things changing, but they're changing almost sometimes too fast to be able to accommodate the materials that are readily available. And this, I think, is where the struggle is, where the balance actually sort of is. It's good to see the use of concrete going down because it's damaging to the environment from an extraction point of view, from the distribution point of view, getting it from A to B and all the rest of it. So it's good to see that going down, particularly if we've got improved methods of putting things together, like creating those voids. And of course, it's something many, many people wouldn't think about. But it is so vital now, and you sort of think about it. Even when you compare a house that was built 50 years ago, and the amount of electricity needed to run through that household, and how many points where the electricity came to, do we have a shortage now of electrical points? The electrical sort of components to actually go into the houses that we're trying to build. Right. All interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It is. All right. Well, look. As per usual, a lovely, vibrant discussion. Thank you so much, Michelle Carr of Construction Alchemy, and Hamish McClay of Search Convey, our Lord and Master, who helped put together these channels. I hope you find it as useful and as knowledge building as I certainly do. Until next week, get your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars. Hope maybe you'll catch the moon, and look after that mental health. Bye-bye.
Bye.